Hi everyone, welcome you all to another session on econometrics. Today what we are going to cover is a chapter on multicollinearity. Now during our discussion of the classical linear regression model, one of the assumptions that we had understood was that of multicollinearity, that which essentially meant that there should not be perfect linearity between explanatory variables. We'll understand in detail what we mean by perfect linearity or perfect linear relationship. But for now, remember this thing that what we try to avoid is perfect linear relationship. Imperfect linear relationship would do. So in a sense, whatever case we take, we will definitely have some amount of multicollinearity in the sense that one x variable will of course be related to the other x variable. For example, let us take the example, if you want to find out, if you want to regress the mileage of a vehicle, and there are different parameters on which you want to judge that. So your dependent variable will become mileage per kilometer. Your dependent variables, say you have engine size, you have weight of the car, you have length of the car, certain so on and so forth. So you have 3-4 variables. So as suppose we take only two variables, one is the weight of the car and the other is the engine size. So both the engine size as one variable and the weight of the car will be correlated. So in econometrics, in a very practical sense, when we talk about multicollinearity, we are only trying to avoid the case of perfect multicollinearity. Every data set will definitely have some amount of collinearity. So this is essentially a problem of degree rather than a problem per se. So every data set you will find out certain amount of multicollinearity. We need to check that if that kind of crosses our threshold, and what are the different kinds of solutions that we might have. So we'll start off with the fact that what is going to be the implications of multicollinearity on the classical linear assumptions. Then we will see that in practical and in theoretical sense, what are the implications on our data. Then B, we will see that how to detect this multicollinearity from our data. And C, we will go on to see that what are the remedies and how to rectify if we have a problem of multicollinearity. The extent, we are saying that the extent of multicollinearity is high, then what are the remedies that are available to us. So with the brief of the chapter being discussed, let's go on and discuss these issues one by one. Now, as I told you that one of the assumptions of the classical linear regression modeling was no perfect multicollinearity. Again, remember that multicollinearity is not a problem. Perfect multicollinearity is something which will throw out your results. Then, what are we going to do? We are going to see the nature of multicollinearity. Is multicollinearity actually a problem? What are the theoretical consequences, the practical consequences of mulicollinearity? One of the theoretical questions which you see in your entrances as well as in your finals is a question from this. Then you also get a linked question from these two aspects, whereby you want to see that how do you detect multicollinearity and what are the issues and how do you eliminate this from the remedial issues. And in all of the chapters after this. So remember, our discussion till now has been from classical linear regression model. We did 2-variable model. Then we introduced 3-variable model on the basis of this. Then we undertook a divergence. We introduced different functional forms, and then we did dummy variables. So with this is the overall architecture of the classical linear, different kind of permutations and combinations that can happen in a regression model. But now what we are concerned in all these chapters, starting from multicollinearity, is that the violation of these assumptions. So 3 assumptions that we will violate. One is multicollinearity, the second will be heteroscedasticity, and the third will be autocorrelation. These are the 3 assumptions that we are going to violate one by one in each chapter, chapter 8, chapter 9 and chapter 10, and we will see that what are the implications. Again, our analysis will be very similar in each chapter. We will see that what are going to be the implications of the problem, then what implication not only in terms of in predictive power, but also in terms of the blue estimates. What happens to blue estimates if we drop these assumptions? Remember when I told you about in the introduction of this course, I told you that these classical linear regression assumptions that you have are something akin to what we have the assumptions in perfect competition. These do not exist in the real world, but we build the classical model of markets on perfect competition, and then to introduce the side of what is actually there in the market, we keep on relaxing the assumptions, and we have different kind of market models. Similarly, we are trying to relax these assumptions, and we are trying to see that what is going to be the implication of our blue estimates, then how do we detect this problem, and what are the remedies. This is going to be a standard format for the next 3 chapters that we are going to cover. And remember, whenever you have a remedy, or this is one solution that I'm going to tell you, which is valid for every kind of data, is transform the data. I'll tell you what transformation is, but if you can probably relate it to functional forms, you kind of divide the entire data with a certain variable so that the extent of the problem kind of minimizes. But that is going to throw different kinds of challenges in the data altogether. Let's start with our discussion here. Now, this is a data set that we have. What do we have in this data set? This is the quantity of a demand of the widget. So this is a demand variable. Now, a demand of a commodity usually depends on its price, and also might depend on income. It will be negatively associated with price and positively associated with income. Now, instead of these two variables, instead of income, we have two researchers. We have two different researchers, researcher 1 and researcher 2. Researcher 1, what he did was he regressed income on as a function of x2 and x3, whereas researcher 2 regressed the demand on x2 and x4. He took earnings, whereby this person took income as a parameter. There's no wide difference. If you can see, there is just slight bit of difference between the two data sets, but this slight difference is going to have a huge impact in our overall modeling. Let's see how. We have two different regressions. As I told you, this is by researcher 1, this is by researcher 2, y being a function of x2 and x3, and this is a altogether different regression, y being a function of x2 and x4. Now, if you try to regress this model through any software that you pick up, be it your Stata, or be it eViews, or be it Python, any kind of software that you pick up, what you will find out is that there will be no output for this regression. Why will be there no output? There will be no output because there is a perfect linear relationship between x2 and x3. If you see x2 and x3, there is a perfect linear relationship between these two variables, which is being defined by x3 is equal to 300 minus 2x2. So let's put x2 as 1. So 300 minus 2, 298. 300 minus 4, 296. 300 minus 6, 294. So there is a perfect linear relationship between these two variables, and because there is a perfect linear relationship between these two variables, and as you can see, one thing, please see that there is no UI. No UI means that this is an exact relationship. And if you see the R square, this is 1, which essentially shows that this is a perfect linear line. And in case of a perfect linear line, what you can do is you can replace your x3 with this, and you can convert this 2 variable or 3 variable regression model into a 2 variable regression model, where your C1 is, we've just walked this around. Your C1 is this and your C2 is this. So while you can estimate this regression line, but even if you find values of C1 and C2, if you estimate, see what we have done in this is we have estimated this regression line, and we have found out these values. So 49 is equal to C1 and 2.1 is equal to C2. With C1 and C2, you have three unknown variables A1, A2 and A3. As you know, in basic algebra, that you need at least three equations to solve three variables. Here we have only two equations and we have three variables, so you cannot uniquely solve for A1, A2 and A3. So with this we come to conclusion that if there is a case of perfect linear relationship, then we might convert this and still find out the relationship, but we still cannot find the values of A1, A2 and A3, which essentially means that we are not able to find out these parameters. And if we are not able to find out these parameters, there is no question of any hypothesis testing approximation about a parameter if you can't even estimate a parameter. So if there is a case of perfect multicollinearity, it's a dead ball, dead game after that. You cannot estimate that model at all. So what we have instead, in real life, you will not exactly find perfect multicollinearity. You will always find the cases of near, imperfect or very high multicollinearity. So whenever we are now going to talk about multicollinearity, we are going to talk about imperfect multicollinearity. So multicollinearity will only be gauged as a matter of degree rather than existence or non-existence. So multicollinearity, for all practical purposes, please remember that it is a problem of a degree. And also remember, I'm going to tell you in this class that it is also a problem of a sample, not of a population. We'll come to that aspect soon. Now what we have done is we have taken the regression model of researcher 2. Now he, instead of using income, he used earnings as a parameter. So he was able to estimate this regression line. Why? Because if you see this regression line, x4 was nothing but x3 plus an random error. So what this researcher did was he added or subtracted a certain error term to these values and found out these and came up with these values. Now, although there is a very high relationship between these two, but that relationship is random. And now there is a very high relationship between x2 and x3 and x4. So you will find out this was 298, this is 297. Of course, there is a very high relationship between these two variables, but the relationship is an imperfect relationship, linear relationship. An imperfect linear relationship can be estimated, but a perfect linear relationship cannot be estimated. So we have estimated this line, but now see what has happened to the standard errors. See, the standard error is extremely extremely huge, and if you see, this is also quite huge. So which essentially means, just a second guys, sorry, I was talking about this. Yeah, so if you see these standard errors now, can you see this is not a significant factor. If you see the t values, what essentially you're talking about is that there is a negative relationship between demand and the price, and that negative relationship is significant. Remember the 2t rule. If the value of t is greater than 2, then you can probably assume that this variable is going to be significant. So the p value is going to be pretty small, especially if it's more than 3. So the p value is going to be pretty small. However, see here, what has happened is you have a negative sign. That means what this is proclaiming is that there is a negative relationship between the earnings and the demand. A negative relationship between earnings and demand can only happen in the case if it is a inferior good. Only in cases of all normal commodities, this relation should be a positive relationship. The second thing to note is that you might expect from your theory that your income or your earnings should have a huge impact, should have a significant impact on demand. That is a priori information, a theoretical information that we already have. However, here it says that this is not a significant factor. However, the third thing to note is that the R square is pretty huge. And when we'll check for this F test, remember the F test? F test is basically for when you have beta 1 is equal to beta 2 is equal to 0. Remember the overall level of significance of the entire model, that is what we dealt in chapter 4. So if we check the F test, we will find this to be pretty significant, that both the factors are simultaneously important. That means we can say that B1 is equal to B2 is not equal to 0. We can say that. So essentially that translates into this formal equation, this formal understanding, that individually one of the parameters is not significant. However, also the sign is different from what we expect, the second thing. And the third thing is that if we check for overall level of significance, it's coming out to be significant. If that is the case, if you find a peculiar example in your data where a lot of your parameters, a lot of your X are coming insignificant, apart from the fact that if you check for overall level of significance, that is significant, that should give you a hint that your data has certain problem of multicollinearity. So essentially, the results that I'm going to discuss here is these: that A, even though you can estimate this line, the difference between the two variables is very small. Then price, as I told you, the price is statistically significant and different from 0. However, if you see the standard error is smaller in the previous case as compared to this. So what we are saying is, see the standard error here, it's 0.81, and see the standard error here, it's 0.12. So when you compare these two, you will find out the standard error has increased, actually increase in case of this, in case of multicollinearity problem. Then again, the other thing is that their income variable is, as I told you, is insignificant and it has a wrong sign. And the third thing that I told you was that the overall level of significance, the overall level of the overall hypothesis that B2 is equal to B3 is equal to 0, that hypothesis that R square is equal to 0. Remember, there's another way to test this. I think it will come somewhere down. We will come to that. We'll come to that test, overall level of significance test as well. So this is coming out to be significant. So which essentially means that overall your model is correct. However, one of the parameters is coming out to be insignificant. When you have these kinds of contradictions in your data, after estimating your data, you can start checking for, you can smell multicollinearity from. That means you can smell multicollinearity from your data. Then there are other tests as well. There are other different tests which will come after some while. Again, what we have done is we have checked for this relationship between x4 and x2. As I told you, between x2 and x3, remember there was a perfect line, 300 minus 2x2 is equal to x3. This was the line that we have. However, if you see x4, this is a imperfect line. There are different errors, and these are all different random errors that we have. And that is why we can find out an imperfect relationship. Remember, I told you there is no UI in that case. However, here you have an EI, which means there is definitely an error. There is definitely an imperfect relationship. However, if you check if you run this regression, you see that your T is extremely high, which essentially shows that there is your x2 significantly explains x4, which essentially is also this. Remember this is something like an auxiliary regression. I'll come to what auxiliary regressions are, but when you run regressions between independent variables to find out whether they significantly explain each other or not, those are called auxiliary regressions. So to explain you again, you have y and you have y being explained by x2, x3, x4 and x5. So an auxiliary regression becomes when you try to explain x2 as a function of x3, x4 and x5. This is called running an auxiliary regression. Why is it an auxiliary regression? Because it is being run not on the entire data set but only on the explanatory variables. And if this regression, if any of these variables is significant, in this case this variable is significant, which means that x2 is a significant factor to explain x4. If that is the case, that means there is multicollinearity. That means there is a strong relationship between x2 and x4. So that is another way to check for multicollinearity, which we will see in detection, is to run auxiliary regressions and to find out whether there exists a significant relationship between any of these variables. So that is how you do it. Then moving forward to theoretical consequences of multicollinearity. As I told you, our prognosis for all chapters will be similar. We will try to explain the problem as we have already done. Then what we will see is, and the explanation is problem is probably going to be heuristical in all the chapters. So we will be learning about the problem while dealing with the problem. So that's a heuristical approach that we take in all other chapters as well. Now the theoretical consequences. So now in each chapter we will see that what are the consequences of the violation of these assumptions on the CLRM model that we have. Remember, the CLRM model gives us the blue estimates, best linear unbiased estimates. We want to see that what happens if we drop the assumption of multicollinearity, or there is very high degree of multicollinearity in data. As we will see that there is not significant, it will not have a significant effect on our on the blue parameters. Let's start with the first one, unbiasedness. Now remember what unbiasedness was. I'm coming back to the first example that we did of unbiasedness. Remember what unbiasedness was? That suppose we had 20 different samples. We had 20 samples and each sample had 100 observations. So we had sample mean x1, we had sample mean x2, we have sample mean x20. Each of these samples have 100 observations. Repeatedly had different samples, and what we did was we had a distribution of this, and we said that the expected mean of this, the grand mean of all the means, different sample means, is going to, so expected value of x bar is going to be equal to the population mean. This was the assumption of unbiasedness. It was essentially a repeated sampling property. So now we only have one sample with us. So on the problem that we have of multicollinearity is only with one sample. If we have multiple samples, that problem is going to go away. So always when you have different samples, the variable will converge to the two population estimate. So multicollinearity has nothing to do with the unbiasedness property, because unbiasedness is a repeated sample property, and we are talking about only one sample which has a problem of multicollinearity. Now always remember that multicollinearity is a sample problem, not a population problem. It might be the case that the sample that you have picked up from the entire universe of population might have a higher degree of relationship between x2 and x3. However, if you generalize this to the population, in overall population, x2 and x3 might have an imperfect or a lesser degree of relationship as compared to the sample that you have picked up. So essentially that translates our problem into the fact that multicollinearity is a sample problem, not a population problem. Then, and that is why you can probably guess that because it's a sample problem, it's a one sample problem, that's why it will not kind of affect the blue properties which we derive from CLRM. Then it also does not destroy the minimum variance property. However, what it does is that the variance actually increases. If you see two kinds of data, one with lesser multicollinearity and one with high multicollinearity, you will find out that the variance, if you see the variance of V2, and remember the or the variance of the entire data, or if you see the variance of the entire data EI, which is essentially this, or variance of any parameter, you will find out that the variance in a data which has lesser multicollinearity, the variance is less. In data which has higher multicollinearity, the variance is more. This is still going to be the minimum variance among the family of all other linear estimators. So the blue estimate said that within, remember the derivation, within the family of all linear estimators, the OLS will give you the least. So the OLS will definitely give you the least right now also. But if you compare two data sets, one with lesser multicollinearity and one with higher multicollinearity, you will find out in case of higher multicollinearity data, the variance has increased, as you can see in this data as well. If you can see, the income coefficient is blue, but the sample at the variance is large compared to the estimate. And if you see, the minimum variance does not mean the numerical value of the variance will be small. So the variance will be quite huge, as well as if the variance is huge, what you can guess is that the confidence interval will be high, the confidence interval will be longer. And if the confidence interval will be longer, what will happen to the t values? The standard errors will increase, the t values will go down. These are all things which are associated with multicollinearity written data. That your variance will go down, your in case of high multicollinearity, your confidence interval for each parameter will increase, your t values will go down, your standard errors will increase. So all of these are kind of kind of symptoms that you can see from a high degree of multicollinearity in your data. As I told you, multicollinearity is a sampling problem, it is not a population problem. Let's see the practical. These were all theoretical consequences. Now I want to discuss the practical consequences of multicollinearity, and this is what is extremely important, more than the theoretical consequences. Now, what is the first practical consequence? That you have large variance, you have large standard errors of OLS estimates, and that can be seen from comparing these two regressions. Now let's compare 8.2 to 8.7 to 8.8. Now this was our 8.8. This was the regression in which there was high multicollinearity. Remember, this was the question where we had taken x2 and x4. And can you see the standard error is 0.81 here. The t value is this. Can you see this? This was the demand for widgets, and this is the price of the widget. So these are the values 0.81 and 0.3. And if you compare this data where you don't have multicollinearity, why you don't have multicollinearity? Because you have converted the data. You have not estimated the parameters. You are not trying to estimate the parameter individually. You are just trying to estimate this x2. And if you see, the standard error was less and the t value was huge. So if you see in the data where you don't have multicollinearity versus the data that you have multicollinearity, and you have the same variable, you see here both the variables are same. Here you have x2, which is the price of widget, and here you have x2, which is also the price of widget, and you have the same y variable, which essentially shows that in case of this data, you can say that the p value will be extremely small because your t value is extremely high. That there is a very significant relationship between the price of widgets and the demand of widgets. However, if you come to this regression where you have multicollinearity as a problem, see the extent of standard error has increased. As I told you, the variance will increase and the t value has decreased. That means the p value is also small. The p value has increased. That means although it is still significant, but the measure of significance, the type 1 error or the alpha with the exact level of significance with which you can predict this or you can claim this is smaller as compared to this the earlier problem. So this is one practical that consequence that you can see. Then that means there is a fall in precision. Whenever you have standard errors going up, what do you mean? You have precision is smaller. Why the precision is smaller? Because you have wider confidence interval. What were the confidence intervals, if you remember? The confidence interval was beta 2 hat plus minus standard error into the alpha beta. Remember, this was the confidence interval. Now what has happened is that your standard error is increasing, and if the standard error is increasing, what is happening? Your confidence interval is increasing. Remember the confidence interval approach? So your confidence interval is higher because the standard error is high in this case. So that is why you have wider confidence interval, and because you have wider confidence interval and your standard error is going up, that is why your t ratios will become insignificant, because what is your t ratio? B3 or B2 by standard error of B2. So remember what t was? B3 minus B3 hat minus B3 upon standard error of beta 3. This is what we had. This is equal to 0. So this is what we are left with. And if your standard error is increasing, what is happening? Your t values are going down. Coming back to the basics again, that's why I had spent so much time on the initial chapters, because you need to be able to recollect all of this. Then apart from that, what you will also have is your R square will be quite high. As I told you in the beginning, whenever you have a prognosis where you have your R square is high, whereas a lot of your variables are insignificant, that should give you a hint that your data has a problem of multicollinearity. Then OLS estimate and then their standard errors are sensitive to small changes in data. Now what we have done here is that in this data set, whatever the data that we had, we only changed 3 values of x4. We changed one as this, the second one as, and the third one as this. So these are very small deviations from the data that we already have. So if there is a very small deviation in the data, that should not result huge changes in your results, because the data is only changed by a very small margin. But if you see, whenever you have the issue of multicollinearity, even if you change the data with a very small effect, the effect on the results will be huge. As you can see that you had a small change in data and your t variable became from 3, it became to -3 to -7. It became extremely significant. Also, if you see your income or your x4 variable, your earnings variable also became a little more significant, and the negative sign actually reduced. So what essentially has happened is, because you have changed these 3 data sets, what you have done is you have changed 3 data sets, and these 3 data sets belong to x4. And because we've changed the relationship, because you've changed 3 data set, the relationship between x2 and x4, which was very strong earlier, has now weakened. As you can imagine, earlier the relationship between x2 and x4 was extremely strong, and that is why our results were going haywire. And you can probably see that extensive multicollinearity having an effect on the level of significance of your parameters. what we have done is, because we have changed 3 data points, the relationship between x2 and x4 has now weakened. And because this has weakened, the extent of the problem of multicollinearity has reduced. And if the extent of multicollinearity of the problem of multicollinearity has reduced, what has happened is that now your standard errors will decrease. And if your standard errors will decrease, your confidence interval will decrease and your t values will start increasing. So that is what has happened with us in this case. Then you can also see that there are wrong signs of regression, because our theoretical analysis say that until unless a particular good is a inferior good, there should be a positive relationship between earnings and your demand. And if you check, see, this is, if you check the individual relationship, what we have done is we have regressed demand on earnings, and we have found out that this is significant and the relationship is positive. Whereas when we took both x2 and x4, this was coming out to be insignificant and this was coming out to be negative, which this should give you again a hint that the wrong sign of regression coefficient can lead to, again, be very careful attributing the wrong sign to multicollinearity, but you should not rule it out either. So you can check for the individual relationship. If it comes out to be significant, if these signs are coming out to be correct as expected, then you can probably dig in a little deeper and see for multicollinearity, again by checking for auxiliary regressions. We'll come to that again. And again, one other aspect is you cannot assess the individual contribution of each explanatory variable to the ESS. So if you regress x4 only, if you regress y on x4, you will find out that it explains 94%. If you regress y on both x2 and x4, this is coming out to be 97%. However, if you regress y on x2, then that is going to be somewhere around 96%. So you cannot attach the explanation power of each different variable to how it explains y. Remember this Venn diagram that I explained you, that y is being explained by x1 and x2. This essentially is what we are talking about is multicollinearity. However, what is happening in this case is these two circles are extremely concentric. Not exactly concentric, but overlap is huge. So their individual ability to explain the variation in y has become challenging. That is what we are suggesting here. Now coming to the problem of detection. How do we detect multicollinearity? As I told you, multicollinearity is a sample specific problem. It is not a population specific problem. And the problem of multicollinearity is the severity of multicollinearity, because you will invariably have the variables as related to each other. So the problem of multicollinearity should not be seen in the binary terms of having it or not having it. So it's not a 0 and 1 problem. It is a problem of the degree to which it exists in your data. Then the again, both the issues, the absence or the various degrees to which it is there, and it is a sample problem. It's not a population problem. So how do we detect it? The first method, high R squares and few significant T ratios. That means your R square is pretty high, supposedly 0. plus in excess of 0.8, whereas that means you can reject your F test, whereby that's the joint hypothesis that all variables are insignificant, that you can reject. However, when you individually check each particular variable, a lot of your variables are coming out to be insignificant. Then high pairwise correlation among explanatory variable. So what you do is basically you have a correlation matrix. There is a simple command in your data sets, in your software for correlation matrix, and if you see that correlation matrix, if each variable has a higher correlation with other variables, So you have six, if you have six explanatory variables, you will have a 6 by 6 matrix, kind of a correlation matrix, and that each x, correlation between x2 and x3, correlation between x2 and x4, correlation between x2 and x5. So these will be your different correlations that you have, and if these are high, which essentially shows that you might have the case of multicollinearity if each any of these relationships is in excess of 0.8. Again, this is not a very reliable method, but again it can suggest you something about multicollinearity. Examination of partial correlations. Now, what is partial correlation? Suppose you have three variables, x2, x3 and x4. So you have rx2, r23, which is the correlation coefficient between 2 and 3. Similarly, you have 2 and 4, you have 3 and 4. These are the three different kinds of relationships, collinear relationships that you can have, correlation coefficients. Now, what you can do is you can find out a partial correlation coefficient. Now, what is a partial correlation coefficient? This is the correlation coefficient between x2 and x3. However, if you try to hold the effect of x4 as constant, this is how we write it. That holding the effect of x, because x4 might have a impact on both x2 and x3. It might be a common factor between x2 and x3. So something like this. So you have x2, you have x2, you have x3, and you have x4. So x4 might have a relationship between both of them. So what we are essentially trying to do is we are saying that we only want to find out the relationship between x2 and x3, keeping x4 as constant, and that is what is called as partial correlation coefficient. Partial correlation coefficient. It's called R23.4. And if you see, the correlation coefficient between 2 and 3 was 0.9. Whereas the partial correlation coefficient between 2 and 3, keeping your x4 as constant, was only this. This correlation coefficient, this shows that x2 and x3 are not very highly related if you keep out x4 out of them. But if you include x4 with them, then the relationship explodes to this particular value. So this is again one of the method of finding out whether and if x2, x3.4, this partial correlation coefficient is also high. That essentially means that x2 and x3 are very collinear. Whereas if this is low and our x2, x3 is high, this shows that x4 is what is causing this multicollinearity. Again, the problem is this pairwise correlation coefficient and the partial correlation coefficients can either one be very exhausting to find out all of these, and second, it can also be misleading. So the alternative method that we have is to run an auxiliary regression. Now, I had introduced auxiliary regression earlier as well. So what you do is you want to find out whether the explanatory variables have a relationship between, or a very strong relationship between, the other variables. So suppose you have y regressed on x2, x3, x4 and till x6 and x7. These are the 6 explanatory variables that you have. Now what you want to find out is that your R square is very high, but individually if you check some of these are coming out to be insignificant, which kind of gives you a hint that your data might have multicollinearity problem. But now you want to find out that which particular xi is giving me the problem. So what you do is you start running auxiliary regressions. You run x2 on all other x's, x3, x4, x5, x6, x7. Similarly, you run x7 and x3 on all other x from x2 to x7. That the r square that you get will be called as r square 2. That means x2 being regressed on all other x's. If x3 is being regressed on all other x's, that's called r square 3. And if these r squares are coming to be significant, how do you check that? Remember this test, F test? I was writing it earlier. That overall level of significance, r your r square divided by the degrees of freedom k minus 1 and 1 minus r square on n minus k. This is what we had also introduced in chapter number 4 to check the overall level of significance. If this is coming out to be significant, if r2 square or r3 square is coming out to be significant, that means that all other variables x2, x3 to x7 are important variables and they can explain x2. That means the x2 has a linear relationship or a strong relationship between all these variables. And whichever variable has a significant parameter, that you can easily imagine that this is definitely a very strong relationship between x2 and that particular x variable. So this is what you do. So suppose we run those regressions and we have these 7 or these 6 auxiliary regressions, x2 on all other x's, x3 on all other x's, x4 on all other x's. These are different regressions, and if you see, this is coming out to be quite huge, this is coming out to be huge, not extremely huge, but still this is coming out to be significant, this is coming out to be significant, this is also quite large. So if you see, what we have is that x2, x4, x5 and x7, x2, x4, x5 and x7 seem to be collinear with all other x's, and which is also measured by their r square. But the problem is that if you want to run all this, that means you would have to run a lot of auxiliary regressions as well to find out which variables have linear relationships. Then the last method that you have is called variance inflation factor, VIF. One question that I wanted to give you. So just checking those values. This was r2 square. This was r7 square, right? So if you see, this value is significant, 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 and significant at 5%. So this shows that there is a relationship between them. Now coming to the variance inflation factor. Now what we will see is that in case of model which will have high multicollinearity, we already know that the variance of each parameter will increase. Remember, because all of them will have standard errors. Standard error, and what is the variance? For example, if you remember variance in a very simplistic in a very simplistic model, the variance is dependent on the standard error. So if that kind of explodes, the variance will increase. If you remember this formula, now remember in the 3 variable regression model, we had found out this to be this was the variance of V2 that we had. The normal variance was what? Summation xi square. This was the variance of V2. But in case of 3 variable case, we had this as variance. Remember? Now what I want you to do as a problem is that find out how we can write this as this form. Please do that. This is a very important question to prove. You need to do certain algebraic manipulations and find out that how the variance formula can be written in this form. So what we have here is, instead of the entire relationship, this relationship, we have replaced this with 1 upon 1 minus square. This is what we have replaced with. See this. If you can compare, we have replaced, this was the original formula, we have replaced everything else with 1 upon 1 minus r2 square, r square 2 square. So this is what this is. What is this? This is when you run x2 on other x's. This is the r square that you get. And see, and this is called 1 upon 1 minus this, if you can term it as I square. See, VIF, this is for B2. For B3, this will be, this should be 3. Yes, this should be 3. Please note this, there is an error there. So if you want to find the variance of BI, that will be summation square xi square into 1 minus ri square, which is that particular variable being regressed on all other explanatory variables, which essentially translates that 1 upon 1 minus ri square is called as variance inflation factor. Because why is it called variance inflation factor? Because suppose this relationship is extremely strong. That means this is coming out to be, say in the first case, this is coming out to be 0.9. If this is 0.9, what is happening? 1 upon 1 minus 0.9. What has happened? This is turned out to be 1 upon 0.1, and this comes out to be 10. If VIF is 10, what has happened is that your variance of all your of your beta 2 is now multiplied by 10. That means again your variance has increased, that means your confidence interval has increased, that means your standard error has gone down, that means your t values have gone down. So essentially what has happened is that because your x2 has a strong relationship between all other x's, the ability of x2 to individually and significantly explain y becomes weak, because it is kind of dependent on all other factors as well. Those are also coming into play to explain x2, and x2 is now explaining y. So that is why that is the logic why your variance of B2 will be high. And in general, please note, when you do, suppose you take up advanced tricks or in your masters, please remember that if your VIF is greater than 10, that is a sure short case of multicollinearity. That means your, remember, when this will be 10, when your particular variable xi, your auxiliary regression will have a value of r square is equal to at least 0.9. Now please remember that will be useful for you in your future. See, this is what I call as VIF. Now, and if this relationship is 0, suppose you say that there is no relationship between the x's, that means this is equal to 0. If this is equal to 0, then that automatically converts, it automatically converts into the normal equation that we have, and there is no problem in estimation. That's why I told you it's a matter of degree. Now, however, if you remember, if you see here, that variance of B2 is not only dependent on this auxiliary regression, it also depends on sigma square. It also depends on this summation xi square, x2i square. So these three variables, this, as well as ri square, all three variables kind of explain the variance. It might be the case that although your ri square is extremely high, but because your overall y, the variance is small, or the errors variance is small, that means your data is fitting pretty well, or the number of observations xi is huge, that what it might lead to is, although your ri square is huge, because your overall variance and the data set is huge, that's why it kind of cancels the effect, and because it cancels the effect, your variance of B2 might still be small. That is why all of these tests are only signifying tests. They are not absolute tests. So the high R square can be counterbalanced by low summation sigma square or high uh, summation x to y square. So these are all in relative sense. So high Ri squares, high auxiliary regression uh, or level of explanation, is neither a necessary nor a sufficient uh, relationship to prove multicollinearity. So R square I is neither necessary nor sufficient to get high standard errors. Thus, multicollinearity by itself need not cause high standard errors. This is often asked as one of the questions of true or false in your examination. And when it's asked, a lot of students write yes or no. There is a problem there because you need to write down this equation. You need to write down about VIF and then explain that why is it so. Then is multicollinearity really a bad problem? Not necessarily, depends on what you want to try to gauge out of it. If you're trying to predict or forecast a mean value, then it's not a very bad problem. But if you're trying to judge the values, the parameters, if the values of parameters is extremely important and if their significance is extremely important, that these variables are significant, then it might lead to a problem. But if you want to predict certain values and if you can take the past data to be true, then that might be the case. Please read this explanation and you'll be able to identify that multicollinearity is not necessarily a problem, depends on different situations. Then there is an example given here. Now in this example you have the consumption of chicken and the variables that you have is per capita real disposable income, you have price of chicken, then you have retail price of pork and retail price of beef. So these are your substitutes, probably your substitutes, or and with the sign of this you can probably find out that these are substitutes. These are positive sign, that means they are substitutes. And as you can find that with the real price of chicken you have negative relationship and this has positive relationship. Now if you see, can you see these two variables? The p value is quite high. That means at 5% level of significance you will reject that the price of pork or the price of beef has any effect on the demand for the consumption of chicken. However, they are important variables. If you run a separate regression, you will find out that if you run a separate regression of y only on the price of pork or the price of beef, you will find out that these are significant variables. However, in our analysis, your R square is coming out to be high, but these two are coming out to be insignificant. This should give you a hint of multicollinearity. But again, what you can do is, since we have taken log forms, the form that we have taken is log forms. What will you have in terms of log? See, all of these are log and your explanatory variable is also in log. What will this be? These are all elasticities. Remember the functional form chapter, log linear model, the interpretation of beta is elasticity. So what you have is again a correlation matrix. As I told you, correlation matrix between x2 and x3, see it's very high, x2 and x4 it's very high, x4 and x2 and x5 is very high, x4 and x3 is high, and x3 and x4 x5 is high. All of these are high, which shows that there might be a problem of multicollinearity again. Then what you do is, as I told you, run auxiliary regressions. You run auxiliary regressions, all of these are coming out to be significant. Your overall R square is significant. Similarly for x3 it's significant, x4 it's significant, x5 it's significant, which shows that all of these variables are associated with each other. Now the last thing to study is now what we can do if we have a data plagued with multicollinearity. One of the solutions is dropping the model, but dropping the variable from the model. But this solution is extremely, I would say that you should never pick up this solution, because the remedy is worse than the disease in itself. It might be the case, as in this case, that the price of pork and the price of beef are extremely important variables, but you're not taking them. So dropping these variables which are important but you're not taking them into account will give you a problem of model misspecification, and your variables will turn out to be biased. This is what we will do in your chapter 7, which is model misspecification. This is the last unit of our course, and we will cover that how in case of model misspecification there might be biasness in the data. Till then you can have a look at this. Then acquiring new data sets. Now, the problem of acquiring new data set is in itself is very expensive. So sampling in itself is a very expensive venture. So if it's not costly and if you can do that, then it will definitely reduce the problem multicollinearity. How it will reduce? Because what will happen is that as your data increases for given level of sigma and r square, if your sample size of x3 increases, then what will happen? This will increase, and if this will increase, your variance of B3 will reduce. Rethinking the model. Rethinking the model, what you mean is that change the functional form. Now, till now, what we had was a log linear specification where you had log y being regressed on all log x's. Instead of that, take linear in variable model. You have taken linear in variable model, your variables have now become significant. Your x4 has now become significant, and even your x5 is kind of halfway there. So which essentially shows that the problem can be kind of be resolved if you change the functional forms. Then the fourth is if you have certain kind of information about certain parameters. Suppose this was the regression that we had. However, in our previous regressions earlier, we knew that the quantity and the earnings have this relationship. That if the earning increases by 1 unit, then the quantity demanded increases by 0.9 units. We already have this prior information, and this prior information is based on the assumption of prior regression. Now, this is a big if. If this relationship holds, and if you can hold this relationship, then this regression becomes a two-variable regression, because you have just reduced all of your quantities with 0.9 into earnings, and now you can find out your B2. But again, A, do you have the cost to finding out this relationship? B, even if you have this relationship in the past, does it really exist now? That these are the two problems that you might face. And the last problem, which is often the best problem, the best solution, is transform the data. In this case, if you see, we have a data set where you have a problem of multicollinearity between x2 and x3, both of these variables coming out to be insignificant, and your R square is pretty high. This is your imports, your GNP, and your consumer price index. What we have done is we have divided all the variables by x3. Now, as you divide both the variables by x3, what it becomes is per capita imports, and this becomes per capita GNP. So by dividing these variables, by dividing this and re-estimating this, this is coming out to be significant, and your R square is significant. The interpretation has changed. Your dependent variable has become real imports, and your independent variable has become real per capita income. So transforming the data, please remember, transforming the data in all kinds of problems is going to be one good solution that you might have, but you need to check what kind of different transformation is fitting. And then you have other remedies. As I told you, you will go through principal component analysis, in which you have Eiger vectors and eigenvalues, and with those you can also see the extent of multicollinearity that can be solved, and with ridge regression. Now, with this we can end this with this topic, and in the end of this PDF you will find out my class notes. You can go through those class notes as well for your revision, and if you have any questions, again you can always post me on WhatsApp. So I thank you all for attending this session. Bye bye.